Welcome to Waste Less, Celebrate More, Tips for a Zero Waste Holiday. My name is Lisa Frank, and I am the Executive Director of Environment America, which works to protect and restore the natural world. I'm glad to team up with PIRG for today's event. PIRG is an advocate for the public interest, standing up for us on problems that affect the public's health, safety, and well-being, like all of our holiday waste. So here's the problem. We throw away at least 25% more trash during the period between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day than any other time of the year. Waste from holiday meals, gift giving, and packaging can trash our holiday spirit and harm the environment. So today we're going to learn how we can all waste less and celebrate more with tips from PIRG and Environment America experts, including zero waste gift ideas, packaging, and what to do with all of those leftovers. We'll do a Q&A at the end of the webinar. You can submit questions at any point using Zoom's Q&A feature, which you should see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer questions at the end. We are going to keep chat closed during the presentations to avoid distracting folks, but we will open it at the end when we're having a discussion if you have your own favorite zero waste tips that you want to share with other attendees. So with that, I'd like to start us off by introducing Kelly Leviker, Beyond Plastic Advocate with PIRG, to share how we can use less plastic over the holiday.
Thank you so much, Lisa. As Lisa said, my name is Kelly Leviker, and I'm the Beyond Plastics Advocate with PIRG. I'm also a mother of a 7-year-old, and I know firsthand how overwhelming all the stuff of the holidays could be. If it was just my husband and I, it might not be such a problem, but with a 7-year-old, the mounds of wrapping paper and the annoying bits of hard plastic that cut you when you try to open something are all too familiar. So we're here today to talk about some of the things we can do to minimize these mounds of trash during the holiday. And I'm here specifically to address the mounds of plastic. But before we dive into how we can reduce our waste, let's talk a little bit more about why we should reduce our plastic waste. Next slide. So the quality that is most desirable about plastic is also the precise quality of why plastic is so environmentally damaging. It lasts for a very, very long time, hundreds to thousands of years. In the US, we generate enough plastic waste to fill the Cowboys Stadium, the largest professional football stadium in the country, every 16 hours. If you break this down by person average, we produce 287 pounds of plastic waste per person per year. Plastic is made from oil and gas, which contributes to climate change. If plastic's life cycle were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. Next slide. So there's an old adage, throw it away, there is no way. I feel like this is an especially applicable adage to plastic because while wood biodegrades and a banana biodegrades, plastic doesn't really biodegrade. And then you may say, but you can recycle it. But recycling rates in the US and worldwide are very low. Estimates vary, but they range somewhere between 5 and 10% of plastic is recycled in the US. And when you recycle something, it's not a forever recycling cycle. It can only be recycled so many times before it's downcycled and can't be recycled anymore. From an economic perspective, buying recycled plastic is about the same as buying virgin plastic. So there's not really much of an economic incentive to use recycled plastic. So a lot of plastic ends up in landfills. Some of plastic ends up being incinerated, where it releases toxic chemicals into the air, which especially affect fence-line communities. We also export a significant amount of plastics abroad. So last year, we exported 920 million pounds of plastic waste that got shipped abroad. In 2018, China stopped accepting plastic waste. So now the biggest acceptor of our waste is Malaysia. Then there are microplastics. So when plastic breaks down, it breaks into little bits that are microplastics, which breaks into little bits that become nanoplastics. And these microplastics have been found everywhere, from the deepest depths of the earth in the Mariana Trench to the highest heights of Mount Everest. They're in and everywhere in between. They're in the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the animals that some people eat. And nanoplastics are being found throughout our own bodies, from our brains, our bloods, to our breast milk of nursing mothers, and to within the tissues of our own hearts. Then, unfortunately, there's also the toxic additives that are added to plastics. These are the plasticizers that makes plastic more flexible, or the UV stabilizers that make it last longer. And these leach into the environment. Okay, so enough bah humbug. Let's turn to some more holiday cheer. So I think one thing that's great is this time of year also presents an opportunity. With such an obvious waste abundance, you can see trash cans filled, overflowing with the gift wrapping and everything else. It presents an opportunity for us to have discussions with our friends and our family about the waste. So I speak to my son about plastic. This weekend we were at the library and I found a book, and it was called Plastic Sucks. And I asked my son, I was like, do you want to check this out? And he's like, oh yeah, I agree with that book. So these conversations can be productive. And I think my son now understands why plastic is problematic. So what are some of the things that we can do? First off, the most obvious is you could buy less gifts that are made of plastic. Another thing we can do is buy fewer gifts. I think one of the images that's really iconic for this time of year is seeing a Christmas tree, and it's got colorful lights and bulbs, and underneath it's filled to the brim with presents. And that image, it doesn't emphasize quality, it emphasizes quantity. And so as a parent, I also feel a pressure that to give my son a good holiday, I need to give him a lot of gifts. And that's a problem. So we can reimagine what that could mean. It could mean, instead of having a Christmas tree filled with a bunch of stuff, what about just like one beautiful bicycle underneath? So question what image, why are you buying all these things? Another thing you can do is buy gifts with less packaging. And so maybe something's not made of plastic, but it's filled and wrapped with plastic. One way you can get bonus points is if you write to a company and say, I wanted to buy this, but had just too much plastic. Another thing you can do is if you do choose to buy online, you can shop strategically. So bundle your things. If you're going to buy something, put a bunch of stuff in your cart and wait until you have everything there, and then buy it, so that it doesn't each come with its own packaging. One study was done in Korea that found that online shopping generates 4.8 times more packaging waste than in-store purchases on average. Another thing you can do is buy gifts that will last or can be used year round. Will the gift be something that brings joy for an extended period of time? Or will it bring that one-time smile or one-time thrill? Is it something that's going to easily break and will need to be replaced within a year? Some things to consider. Another thing is buy gifts that you're confident that the person will not return them, that you think they will actually like and use those. If you're unsure what a person's personal preferences are, perhaps a gift card is a better option, because returned items create a lot of waste in the packaging that's just doesn't amount to anything. Okay, next slide. Some other ideas is alternatives to just all this stuff. A secret Santa. If you have a big family or group of friends or a lot of colleagues that you would like to get gifts for, one thing you can consider is maybe if we have a secret Santa, we can focus more on quality than quantity. You can also do pre-loved gifts. So a mug made of pottery from a thrift store looks pretty similar to a new mug from a normal store. So you can have pre-loved gifts. Also experiences instead of stuff. Maybe your loved one has always wanted to go skydiving or take Indonesian dance lessons or go to a concert or a weekend getaway. All these things can be replacements to just piling up our stuff. We can also do homemade gifts. Like, for example, I'm making a scarf. Oh, we can't really see that. A scarf for my husband right now. We can also share gifts. So that's one thing also that my husband and I often do is we think of what do we need and we buy that one thing that we both need and share it over the year. So we can do our part to reduce our waste, and changing company behavior starts with us. When we couple our actions with pushes for state or federal laws and put pressure on companies to do more, our impact grows even further. So stay tuned until the end when we will drop a petition into the chat to tell Amazon to phase out wasteful packaging. Thank you so much and happy
Thank you,
holidays.
Kelly. I know some of my favorite gifts in years past have been concert tickets or other experiences, like a membership to a local outdoors club rather than something made of plastic. Next, I'd like to invite Kathryn to speak with us about fashion waste. Oop. Sorry, my apologies. First, we want to hear from Steph about electronic waste and what we can do about it.
Okay, hi, I'm Steph, and I work on PIRG's Designed to Last campaign. And today I'm going to talk to you about the issue of electronic waste and our annual Fix for the Holidays guide, which has a ton of helpful tips on what you can do about this issue when you're shopping for gifts for your friends and family. Next slide. So this is the problem. E-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. This includes appliances as well as consumer electronics. But it just comes down to the fact that manufacturers every year want us to buy whatever the newest model of the electronic is. And this results in just a completely unsustainable buying habit. On average, Americans throw out 152 million smartphones every year. And on the next slide, you'll be able to see that Americans also purchase 161 million new smartphones every year. That's 416,000 smartphones a day. That's just insane. There's absolutely no need to be engaging in that kind of consumption. If you go to the next bit, the impact of this habit is huge. Our cell phone habit takes 23.7 million tons of raw materials to satisfy. So that's the same thing as consuming an Empire State Building's worth of material every 6 days. And this is not a difficult problem to make an impact on. If we held onto our phones just 1 year longer than average, the emission reductions would be equivalent to taking 636,000 cars off the road every year. And it would reduce manufacturing material demand by 42.5 million pounds a day. That's the same thing as cutting a jumbo jet's weight in raw material use every 17 minutes. So the problem is huge in scale, but also the solution can be big in scale, and it doesn't take a really dramatic change of behavior. So next slide. So again, it's kind of a pattern based on what Kelly was saying about single-use plastics. We can't just recycle our way out of this problem. Less than 9% of e-waste is recycled in the Americas, and in the rare case that a smartphone is recycled, just between 20% and 35% of the material is just completely lost. Phones also use something called rare earth metals, which there's a very limited amount, and they are almost always unable to be recovered from recycling. 99% of rare earth metals are wasted when phones are recycled. When your phone is shredded, a ton of energy is wasted as well. Enough energy to power over 1,060 watt light bulbs for an hour. And finally, it's not just that there's a capacity problem, that there's too much stuff, it's also a technology problem. We just don't yet have the ability to make a smartphone from 100% recycled materials. We don't have like a magic spell that just converts a phone into the raw materials that we need. It's just not something that we have the capability to do yet. And so when you hear about a phone getting recycled, what it really means is that it's becoming shredded and to become essentially scrap metal. Very little of what actually is recycled ends up being usable and gets used to make another device. So on the next slide, I'm going to introduce you to our annual Fix for the Holidays report. This is a report that we release every year and has a ton of helpful tips on alternatives to just recycling about how you can help counter this e-waste problem. And also, it'll save you a lot of money when it comes to shopping for electronics during the holidays. So shopping refurbished is important because the impact or buying a refurbished smartphone reduces the impact of gifting that smartphone between 77% and 91%. So it's a huge difference gifting a new smartphone versus a refurbished one. And a refurbished phone also prevents the extraction of 180 pounds of resources and the emission of 50 pounds of climate change pollutants. We're going to give you the link to the full report at the end with all of our other resources, but I'm going to go over some quick tips now that will be featured in the guide that you guys can learn more about. So the first thing is check the warranty length. That's important in any purchase, but actually refurbished products tend to have much longer warranties than buying new products. So Backmarket and Declutter, which are two great refurbished vendors, which I'll share more information about later, both have a mandatory minimum 1-year warranty, which is much longer than the standard warranty for most big tech sellers. Other refurbished outlets like VIP Outlet and Amazon Refurbished have minimum 90-day warranties. It's really important to, like with any purchase, read the fine print, know what you're getting into. These long warranties are important because if your object has a defect or something broken that you weren't expecting, you'll be able to get a refund or an exchange with no problem. And a lot of these sites also have 30-day return policies, which is super helpful. The next tip is make sure you're getting the price that you deserve for shopping refurbished. Generally speaking, getting a pre-owned device should be about 15 to 20% less expensive than buying something new. So an example is the 13-inch MacBook Air from 2021. When it came out, it cost between $1,000 and $1,300 new from Apple, versus now you can buy the same laptop for under $600 in excellent like-new condition from somewhere like Backmarket. So make sure you're getting that discount that you deserve for shopping refurbished. The next tip is to check the accessories. So if you think about when you buy a new iPhone from Apple, it has maybe chargers or earbuds that come in that package with it. That's not always the case for refurbished tech. So it's important to, again, read the fine print, make sure you know what you're getting. And if you don't have that charger for that device already coming to you, that might be something that you need to purchase separately. So don't assume it's coming with all of the accessories and parts that come with a new device. And the last quick tip is to see if your device is repairable. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but you need to understand whether the device that you're buying is just in general a repairable device. So an example of a very unrepairable device is AirPods. AirPods have glued-in batteries that can't be replaced. Another example of a not so repairable device is a flat screen TV. Those are just hard to buy refurbished. They're not as easy to replace parts for as a smartphone or a laptop. So to counter this problem is you can just do a little bit of research, and I'm going to share some resources to find this information, but look into this thing called repair scores, which is just a really easy way to understand the repairability of a device that you're getting and the track record of the manufacturer in terms of providing parts and support and things like that. And again, US PIRG and our partner iFixit have some great resources that track both durability and repairability for different technologies. So I'm going to share that with you later. So where can you do this? Again, all these links are going to go out to all of you. But here are some of our favorite refurbished sellers. They all have a rigorous verification process where they make sure that all the items that they're selling are fully working. They don't look beat up. They don't look scratched. In fact, many of these outlets are selling things that have never actually been removed from the box, because if you can believe it, there are people who buy electronics, never use them, and then want to sell them. And so you're basically getting new or like new quality electronics for a fraction of the price. And if you didn't know, there are also mainstream sellers that you have heard of that have their own refurbished tech programs. Amazon, Apple, Samsung, Google, Walmart, and Best Buy are just a couple of the more mainstream corporate sellers that have their own dedicated refurbishing programs. So to wrap things up, even though we're talking about this in the context of the holidays where we want to get our friends, the new PlayStation, or you want to get your mom a new iPad, this is really a year-round movement. So I mentioned earlier this thing called repair scores. If you've ever seen an energy guide label on a fridge to tell you how energy efficient it is, it's like that, but for repairability. And actually, this is already a big thing. Consumers in other countries already see repair scores when they shop for tech on Amazon. It's kind of ridiculous that we don't get to see that also. And you'll be able to take action on that issue when we send out our links at the end. But overall, if you go to the next slide, this doesn't just apply to consumer tech, but appliances as well. Household appliances need to be fixable. They need to have lasting support. Manufacturers shouldn't be able to just break them with no notice after you've invested all that money. And once again, this isn't a huge lifestyle change. Just one more year of holding onto your phone makes a huge difference. 50 pounds of carbon emissions cut immediately just with that one extra year. So this isn't like a huge difference from what you're already doing. It's just these little things that we don't realize add up to these huge amounts of waste. So to wrap it all up, you deserve to own the products that you buy. You should not be wasting your investment on these $1,000 to $2,000 devices and appliances that cost even more. You're wasting your investment if we're just letting shady manufacturer practices force us to contribute even more waste to this huge waste stream that's already a problem. So this holiday season, we recommend that you buy refurbished tech instead of buying the brand new iPhone that you probably can't tell the difference of between the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 13. I definitely can't. And remember, you have a right to repair your stuff. You bought it, you owned it, it's your hard-earned money, and you deserve access to this information and to these resources, and we're going to give them all to you at the end of this. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. Next, now I would like to indeed invite Kathryn to speak with us about holiday clothing waste.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So as Lisa said, I will be talking about all of the clothing waste that accumulates during the holiday season and how you can avoid it. So next slide. To begin, I just want to start by talking about the overarching problems within the fashion industry. So the fashion industry is producing more clothing than we can even wear. Right now, we're producing over 100 billion items of new clothing every single year, and that's double the amount that was produced in the year 2000. A lot of this overconsumption and overproduction is fueled by fast fashion, which is a business model that involves mass producing clothing at low cost to quickly meet these really fast changing trends. This clothing is often lower in quality and falls apart quickly or is really only meant to be discarded just after a few wears. Next slide. So because of the influence of fast fashion and the cultural pressures that are telling us to buy more and more stuff all the time, the average US consumer buys 60% more clothes than we did at the turn of the century, keeps them for roughly half as long, and throws away about 80 pounds of clothes each year. In fact, textile waste is the fastest growing waste stream within the United States, but this is also a globalized problem. So next slide. So around the world, the equivalent of one dump truck full of clothing is dumped in a landfill or burned every single second. This is not only a huge waste of resources, but it contributes to climate change and our landfill problems. And it just all around shows that we have a massive waste problem that is only continuing to grow. Next slide. So overall, the fashion industry has a very large impact on our environment. The fashion industry accounts for about 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the combined emissions of international flights and maritime shipping. So making clothing is a very resource-intensive process, and it has a really long and globalized supply chain that all contributes to the industry's climate warming emissions. The fashion industry also accounts for about 20% of global water pollution. This water pollution comes from the toxic chemicals and dyes that are used during the dyeing and treatment processes, and they often run off into our waterways and contribute to that pollution. The fashion industry is also responsible for about 35% of microplastics that are found in our oceans. And this is because over 60% of our clothing today is made of synthetic fabrics like polyester, nylon, fleece, spandex. These synthetic fibers are actually made from fossil fuels, which means that they're plastic. So every time we wash our synthetic clothing, it sheds microplastic fibers into our water, which eventually end up in our oceans. This contributes a lot to the overall environmental footprint of our clothing since these plastics don't biodegrade in the environment. So overall, the fashion industry clearly has a massive impact on our environment. So we want to work to reduce the amount of clothing we buy, consume, and eventually throw away. So next slide. So during the holiday season, retail shopping and spending increases drastically. I don't think this comes at a shock to anyone, but in 2022, about 50% of Gen Z and millennials who were surveyed were planning on buying a new outfit for the holiday season. And this year, consumers are predicted to spend a record $902 per person on average across gifts, food, decorations, and other seasonal items within the US. This just shows that beyond buying gifts, our overall consumption increases during the holiday season, and that certainly pertains to clothing as well. Next slide. So Black Friday and Cyber Monday obviously fuel this overconsumption, but these trends certainly continue throughout the new year and the overall holiday season. A lot of fast fashion brands will advertise extremely high sales during these times. And while these can be really tempting, the clothes are likely very low quality and are designed to last only a few wears. What's more, these high urgency sales result in a lot of returns, and returning clothing creates additional emissions in shipping items back to the retailer, especially if they're online. But what's less known is that, especially through online returns, many clothing items that are returned, even if they were never worn, are never resold and are sent straight to a landfill instead. So before buying into these mega sales, it's just important to ask yourself, is this something I really need? Is the item good quality and will it last me for a long time? It's a lot better to buy one good quality, durable item of clothing than 10 items that will only last a few wears and will end up in the trash. You can also ask if it's super trendy and will go out of style next season, or will it be a timeless piece that I can wear for a long period of time? Next slide. So these are just a few things to consider when shopping for the holidays, whether it's for yourself or for others. So next slide. These are some of the tips that we have for when you're shopping for yourself. The first is to just shop from your own closet. The most sustainable thing you can wear is what you already own. So this is by far the best practice for reducing clothing waste. The second tip is to rent a holiday outfit. There are a lot of great clothing rental sites online where you can try out an exciting new holiday outfit for just a fraction of the price. And you can also avoid buying an outfit that you'll only wear about once per year. And this is also a really fun way to try out something that you might not necessarily want to buy and invest in, but still try to wear during the holiday season. The third tip is to borrow from a friend or host a clothing swap. Hosting or attending a clothing swap during the holidays is a really fun event for your friends and your community where everyone brings a few gently loved items of clothing that they're willing to essentially trade. This way you can get something new while also cleaning out your own wardrobe and ensuring that your pre-loved clothing items go to somebody who will actually wear and appreciate them. The fourth tip is to buy secondhand or vintage. With the rise in popularity around thrifting, this is not only applicable to those brick and mortar in-person sites, but also there are a lot of online sites now where you can buy secondhand clothing. And finally, if you can't avoid buying new, the fifth tip is to buy from a more sustainable business. The website Good On You is a great resource where you can look up different brands to see their sustainability ratings, and we'll share this with the other resources at the end of the webinar. But some key things to remember are to try to avoid synthetic fabrics and sequins, which are both made of plastic. And you should also look for something that is made with high quality materials and will be timeless. So it won't go out of style quickly, and you'll be able to hold on to that for a really long time. Next slide. So since we're talking about holiday clothing, I couldn't leave out one of the most popular types, which is holiday sweaters. So in the UK, a study found that 1 in 3 adults under 35 buys a new holiday sweater every single year, but 2 in 5 of these sweaters are only worn once over the holiday season. So to avoid contributing to this waste, instead of buying a new holiday sweater, you can wear one that you already own. This is my holiday sweater, which I have had for about 10 years now. It's the only one I own, and I've loved wearing it and re-wearing it every single year. You can also thrift a sweater, which helps to keep those items out of our waste stream for a bit longer. If you are buying one, you should stay away from some of those external decorations like lights or even those that are shown on the photo on the left, because they're often made from plastic and make the sweater a lot more difficult to wash, which just incentivizes you to discard it more quickly if you're not able to wash it. The final tip is to host a craft night where you and your friends can upcycle old sweaters. You can even pick up your crafts for this from a creative reuse center, which is basically a secondhand store for crafts that would otherwise be in a landfill. So always good to check in your local area to see if that's an option. But otherwise, this is a great way of upcycling some of your older clothing that you might not be wearing as much anymore. Next slide. So finally, if you're shopping for a gift for a friend or a loved one or a colleague, these are some alternative gift ideas. First of all, you can make something for your loved one, such as knitting a blanket or crocheting a hat. This can save you a lot of money and also be a really fun project to work on throughout the holidays. There are also a ton of free online resources that teach you how to make these different things, even if you're a beginner. Next, you can give a gift card. So this helps to avoid all of those wasteful returns that often happen in gift giving, especially for clothing, because you don't always know how an item will fit somebody or feel on somebody. So you can always pick out an item that you'd like to gift them and then get them a gift card for them to actually go in store and purchase it. And that way you can avoid the back and forth of returns that might end up in the landfill. And finally, it's important to try to avoid fast fashion, so you can thrift or shop secondhand to find a more unique gift. And you can also support a small business or a more sustainable brand. And this will result in more high quality gifts of clothing, as well as ones that will last them beyond just a few wears. So overall, a lot of our holiday waste comes from clothing, even though it's not often first on our minds. Whether you're buying yourself an item or shopping for a gift for someone else. So those were just a few of the tips, and I hope you can all utilize them this holiday season to embrace sustainable fashion.
Thank you, Kathryn. One of my favorite holiday party sweaters came from a thrift bin. I think it was about $5, and I've used it many, many times since. So once you have found the right gift for your loved one, you may need to wrap that gift to present it to them. And that provides even more opportunities to get creative while reducing waste. So to talk about that, I'd like to bring up Theo Rosen, who's an associate with Environment America.
Hi, thanks, Lisa. So I'm going to talk today about one of the most visible types of waste that we see around the holidays, which is gift wrap or wrapping paper. I know when I was growing up, every Christmas, my dad would follow my brother and I around with a trash bag every time we were opening gifts, and he would be able to fill up one of these whole big trash bags with wrapping paper because there was so much of it. And he would always try to recycle it, but the unfortunate reality is that a lot of wrapping paper is actually just not recyclable. Shiny coatings and glitter and foils can make the paper non-recyclable. And what that means is that over half of the wrapping paper that is produced each year ends up in the landfill. We have estimates that about 2.6 billion pounds of wrapping paper gets thrown away each year in the United States alone. And for all the reasons that have been previously mentioned, that waste is a real problem. clogs up our landfills, especially this plastic coated stuff lasts in our environment forever. And it's kind of particularly absurd when it comes to gift wrap because it's not actually part of the gift that you're giving someone, and it gets torn to shreds in a couple of seconds once you hand that gift to somebody else. So today I'm going to give some quick tips on kind of if you are buying wrapping paper, how to make sure the stuff that you're buying is the recyclable stuff. But potentially even more importantly, gift wrap is kind of one of the things that you can really cut or significantly reduce in your life. So I'm also going to give some ideas for reusable forms of gift wrap that take the plastic waste entirely out of the equation. And I'll end with a quick demo of what some cute and festive zero waste gift wrapping can look like. All right, so next slide. So the first tip is if you are in the market for buying some wrapping paper, you want to make sure you avoid glitter and foil. Those are the types of things that will make that paper not recyclable. Another thing that will make it non-recyclable is a plastic coating, so you want to check for that. There's a couple ways you can check. If you have a piece of paper, a piece of wrapping paper, and you can rip it, and it rips just like normal paper. And when you scrunch it up in a ball, it stays scrunched and it doesn't bounce back. That paper is probably recyclable, and it doesn't have a plastic coating on it, which is good. Another thing to look out for are ribbons and bows. Traditional plastic ribbons and bows are usually made of a plastic paper composite that is not recyclable, but there are recyclable alternatives. So things like string or twine. I have here kind of a festive red kitchen twine that is totally recyclable, and you can make a cute bow out of that. You can also DIY your own little bows out of things like newspaper. So this is a little bow that I made out of a Costco ad that was delivered to my apartment. Things like more fabric type ribbons, something like this. These are actually often also made of a polyester, almost plastic material. These will probably end up in a landfill too, but they're much easier to reuse year after year. And so those can be a good option if you keep reusing them. All right, next slide. But even better than buying new paper or ribbons, you can also just find lower waste or reusable ways to wrap your gifts. And you can have a lot of fun actually getting creative with some of these. I know I did preparing for this. So the first tip is to just use materials that you already have. So you might already have wrapping paper lying around at home. Use it. No need to buy more if you already have some. Old gift bags are also great. Gift bags people tend to actually reuse gift bags. So they can be a better alternative to wrapping paper. Newspaper makes great wrapping paper. Paper bags, like paper shopping bags, also are great. You can use them as gift bags, or you can just turn them into wrapping paper. So this here is an example that I did with a Trader Joe's bag. And this big bow right here, you can see, is made of that same twine that I showed you before. So it's a recyclable bow as well. And then this that you can see over here kind of leads me into my next tip, which is to incorporate natural materials into the decoration. So this right here that was on that gift is a dehydrated orange slice. I made these myself. They're super fun. They make your house smell great when you make them. And that is totally natural and biodegradable. And then this is just a little piece of pine needle. You can just grab, you can pull it off a Christmas tree if you have one, the house. And that's a way that you can decorate in a way that is less wasteful. The third tip is to just opt for reusable gift wraps, for forms of gift wraps that can be reused year after year. So one fun way to do that is to use part of the gift to wrap the rest of the gift. So if you're following Kathryn's tip, for instance, and giving someone some sustainable fashion, you can use that to wrap. So this here is actually just wrapped in a scarf. And then tied up again with that twine bow. Another option kind of in that same vein is to use something like a tote bag. So I have this example here as well. This gift is wrapped in a tote bag. If you see there, it's all folded in and the handles are tucked in and then decorated with those ribbons and natural materials again. And whoever you give this to will get the gift inside and a cute new tote bag that they can use to reduce their plastic waste when they go grocery shopping. Right, and the last kind of option for reusable is to just use fabric. So I'm actually going to do a demo of this for you all. And fabric is a cool option because it is kind of fun to trade and swap with your friends. So, movie magic. Here's my demo camera. So I have a piece of fabric right here, and you can use any type of fabric to wrap gifts, but this is kind of a stretchy jersey material, which is the easiest. So that's a tip. It's easy to work with. And then I have here this book. It's my gift that I'm wrapping. And well, you can all see here, you just kind of wrap it basically like a normal present, but with fabric. So you want to fold in the sides, and I double this up just because it's a little bit smaller. Fold that up, and then on the side, you want to tuck in the edges, again, kind of just like you would with a normal wrapping paper. And then I just do a little twist. On the other side, same thing. Tuck it in. And do a little twist. And with this, you kind of just play around with it until it looks good. So you can tie that in a knot right there, and then fix it up. So tuck that corner in, tuck those in, and then I'm going to decorate just like I did all my other ones with my natural materials. So I have a little pine situation and one of my oranges. And that is all wrapped up. And the great thing about something like this is that it's entirely waste-free, because this wrapping is totally reusable, and these decorations are natural and biodegradable. There's no plastic waste. None of this will end up in a landfill, which is exactly what we want. So I hope that gave you all some ideas for how you might wrap your things a little bit more creatively this year. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. That was so great. Much better than my attempts at newspaper, although the newspaper totally works too. Okay, our last topic is food waste. And for that, I'm inviting Belle Sherwood, associate with PennEnvironment, to share some final tips.
All right. So diving in, if we head to there it is, food waste slide. Speaking generally, food waste is a problem year-round. Over 30 million tons of food end up in landfills every year. And when that food decomposes in landfills, it produces this gas methane. It's a greenhouse gas that's 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide, which is the greenhouse gas most people usually associate when they think of climate change. And emissions from food waste in landfills in the US each year is equivalent to releasing 300,000 rail cars worth of coal burned annually. It's a bit of a confusing statistic, but essentially what it means is that food waste is almost as terrible for our environment as burning coal is. And when we get into the holiday season, as we mentioned before, we know that overall household waste increases by about 20%, 25%. And a lot of that is because of the food that we waste. And this is a really interesting statistic when we know that at the same time, almost 18 million households are food insecure in the US. Really, given the amount of time, resources, and labor it takes to produce our food, especially the labor it takes to create some of the beautiful holiday spreads we see on our Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah tables, the last thing we want is for that food to end up in landfills, when instead it could be used to feed families that need it, or to create high quality compost to help grow next year's holiday table. What you'll see on the next slide, my apologies, it's got some more of the stats. But moving on to the slide after this, there is some good news that there are plenty of ways to significantly cut down on wasted food, and it's really in the spirit of the holidays to do so. You can help to reduce food waste or a good reason to help reduce food waste is that it helps take care of our planet by lowering greenhouse gas emissions. It helps save your family money by being strategic around holiday meals. You can support your community by donating any extras and conserving the valuable, again, energy, resources, and labor that goes into producing our food by keeping it out of the trash. Now I'm going to go through some top tips to make sure that you're reducing food waste this holiday season. The first tip here is to plan ahead and serve strategically. This is one of the most simple ways to reduce holiday food waste. If you're hosting, make sure that you get an accurate head count, be aware of dietary restrictions, and plan accordingly. Food Network suggests that you should plan to serve about a pound of food per person in total. Of course, you know your family and how much of eaters they are more than Food Network might, so plan for that. There's also a handy tool, a calculator, if you will, that will be sent out with the other resources later that can help you plan your menu. Lastly, using smaller plates and letting guests serve themselves can help avoid plate scraps by reminding people that their eyes might be a little bit bigger than their stomachs. Even though what's on the table might look really delicious, we want to make sure we're only taking what we know we can eat to avoid waste. Our next tip here on the next slide is that you want to know how to interpret date labels. Best by, use by, sell by can all mean different things. Infant formula is actually the only regulated food label. All others, like that best by, use by, sell by, are not federally regulated. That means that those date labels are not really an indicator of safety, more so of a guest quality. At least 10% of household food waste is due to consumer confusion over these date labels. Food that's past its date label is usually still fine to eat until there's evidence that it's spoiled. Last year's can of cranberry sauce or green beans can still be incorporated into this year's meal. On the next slide, another tip here is to plan for leftovers. We should really expect them by now. A big turkey, no matter how big your family is, will probably still produce leftovers. So make sure that you establish a plan beforehand on how to deal with those. Set the expectation ahead of time that guests should plan to take home their leftovers. Ask guests to bring their own containers, again, helping to limit on single-use plastic waste, and maybe have some spare ones on hand for those who forget. Our next tip here on the next slide is to store your leftovers properly. In this case, the freezer is your friend. It essentially acts as a pause button for leftovers. There are just a couple things to keep in mind when freezing your food. Store foods with a higher risk of foodborne illness near the back of the freezer. This helps stop the spreading. Don't put hot food immediately in the freezer because it can cause other items around it to thaw. When you want to take food out of the freezer, safely thaw it by placing it in the fridge for a couple hours or in a cold bowl of water that you change every 30 minutes. And make sure to date and label foods so you know how long things have been in there. And you can help use this chart to get an idea of how long you can store things and when maybe it's time to eventually throw it out. And our last tip here on the next slide is that when in doubt, donate it or compost it. Your first goal with food waste should always be to avoid it in the first place, but inevitably we sometimes end up with food that we just don't have a use for. If you have good, still edible food that you know you are not going to eat, you can donate it. There are laws in place that protect people and organizations from liability when donating food to those in need. So just check in with a local food pantry to make sure that they can use what you're planning to donate. But if you have food that's gone bad, it's just scraps, or can't be donated, compost it. And if you don't have a compost in your backyard, if you live in an apartment building, there are some cities, farmers markets, or community gardens that have composting programs you can join. You can also check out kitchen compost, or if you do have a backyard or a green space, trying out a backyard compost. Again, resources to develop that will be sent later. And on the last slide here, we know that reducing wasted food can have a ripple effect on our environment and our community. The average household could save up to $1,500 a year by reducing food waste, and we could provide millions of people meals. Not to mention, we could also enrich our soil with high quality compost and significantly cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, removing food waste from landfills could potentially reduce methane emissions by over 30%. Now, in addition to all the ways that you can reduce food waste in your own household this holiday season, you can also help to tackle food waste on a larger scale. Earlier, I talked about how confusing date labels like best by, use by, sell by are, and how they can contribute to wasting food. Again, most of the time, these labels don't actually communicate anything about food safety or its edibility. They are usually just the manufacturer's best guess at how long a product will remain at peak freshness. Again, more than 10% of all food thrown away by consumers is due to this confusion over date labels. That's why we at PIRG and Environment America are working to help pass the bipartisan Food Date Labeling Act, which will tackle one of the worst kinds of food waste, the food you can still eat. And you can help by signing this petition to tell Congress to take action. Like I said, there will be many links thrown in the chat, but right now, this is an action you can take here. And that's a little bit about how to reduce food waste this holiday season.
Great. Thank you, Belle, and thank you to all of our experts. We next wanted to share in the chat a few more resources for everybody to reduce waste this holiday season and more ways you can take action. Certainly, if all of us keep our phones a little bit longer, think twice about buying that plastic item, check out the local thrift shop, wrap our goods sustainably, and enjoy all the holiday leftovers, we can make a pretty big impact on the waste that we're creating this season. But if we all pool our voices, we can have an even bigger impact as well by convincing companies to reduce wasteful packaging, clarify their food labels, and more. So please do take a look at the actions. I'm now going to pull down the slides so that we can have some question and answer. So let me stop sharing this. All right. And folks can submit questions via the Q&A feature. I am also going to enable the chat for people to share. If you have your own tips on reducing waste relevant to the questions and topics we've discussed, you're welcome to submit them there. But please continue to use the Q&A feature for questions that you want our experts to answer. So people should now be able to do that. Great, and then let's take our first question here. One person asked gift cards that, we've mentioned gift cards a few times as an option here, and gift cards are often made of plastic. So what's the calculation on doing that versus actually purchasing the item? Would one of our panelists like to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think a lot of times nowadays you can buy virtual gift cards, so it gets sent either via email or some way like that, so that you can actually just send them an electronic gift card. So you don't have to buy the physical plastic piece, and that can really help avoid that excess plastic.
Great. And I expect even if you have to do the plastic, that's still going to be less wasteful than an item that has to be shipped and then returned. So it's something to consider depending on how confident you are that the person you're gifting for will want the gift that you choose. There's a question for Theo about how to know whether colored twine is recyclable.
Yeah, great question. And it is, it can be a little bit complicated because twine can actually be made of a lot of different things. But most kitchen twine, if you're just getting kind of typical kitchen twine, is going to be made of cotton, and twine that is 100% cotton. And you're just going to want to look at the packaging basically to see what's in it and what it's made of. But 100% cotton twine is actually compostable. So that is even better. Twine that is, there's a lot of twine that's made of cotton can also be recycled if your recycling center takes textiles, which will depend. You can also take it to a textile recycling center. Some twine will be made out of polyester or a kind of synthetic blend, best to avoid those. They probably will be landfilled. And then there are also some more natural types of twine that are biodegradable, compostable as well. So you just kind of want to look at, make sure that you understand what you're getting.
Great. Thanks, Theo. Another question is, okay, so we're all trying to do our part here to reduce waste, but what can we do to hold manufacturers accountable for the waste they produce, such as, either making products that aren't repairable, that aren't going to last long, or that otherwise incorporate more materials. And I think everybody probably has something to add on this. Steph, would you like to go first?
Yeah, so the quickest answer to this is that we are doing that. We are holding wasteful manufacturers accountable. That's a lot of the work that PIRG does. The actions and petitions that we're going to be sharing in this chat are great examples of that. They're directly addressed to manufacturers like Apple and Amazon, highlighting specific examples of their wasteful practices. And the even better news is that this is working. Last year, Amazon committed to phasing out plastic packaging, although we're still constantly nagging them and pushing that along to make sure that their packaging is actually recyclable. And because of the work of organizations like PIRG and our Right to Repair and Design to Last campaigns, the most recent iPhone to come out was the most repairable device Apple has ever released. And we actually put out a piece celebrating them for that, and they emailed us to say thank you. So they're listening. They know that this is important. They know that this is an ever more popular opinion to hold, that manufacturers need to be less wasteful. And when we organize and put out actions like this and do things like sign petitions and call representatives and donate to organizing groups, it does make a difference. And I haven't even been working here that long, and I can tell you right now that we're making a difference all the time.
Yes, and I definitely encourage people to take action on those issues in the chat. A related question we have is whether we have any petitions for online resellers to not throw away returned items. You remember we mentioned often if you return an item, they don't even bother putting it back on the shelves. It just goes straight to the landfill. Kathryn, do you want to take that question?
Sure, yeah. So we have a lot of different actions, whether it's calling on Amazon or various retailers to take actions to be less wasteful. For clothing specifically, we have 2 actions calling on both Forever 21 and H&M, which are 2 very popular fast fashion brands, and asking them to publicly commit to not trash or burn their overstock, which is their unsold, unworn clothing. A lot of retailers will do this within the industry, and so this is another way to tackle that unnecessary waste. And a lot of that does come back from returns, even if the person has never even worn it. So those are some of the ways that we're calling on specific companies to do this. And then we're also working to pass state legislation, so you can ask your governor to take action on this as well.
Great.
And I will have those links in the chat too.
Yeah, thank you, Kathryn. And then to close us out, we have a few people asking about getting recording or the tips and resources. We will be emailing both the recording of this webinar and all of the resources, actions, and links that you can use after this. So everybody should get that from us. And we look forward to hearing from you all in the future about all of your great creative holiday ideas that you use this year to reduce waste. With that, thank you all for joining us for Waste Less, Celebrate More, and happy holidays, everybody.